Okay, shall we go for it?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's go for our road trip.
All right.
Okay, so where are we off to today?
Well, let's hope it stops raining. That'll be good. We are going to Bentley Urban Farm. We're going to meet up with a guy called Warren Draper, who's written a few articles for Freedom News, and we're going to take a look at what the space that they've got there and what they're doing with it. And hopefully, it'll be a really interesting discussion that we have out there. But in the meantime, why don't we play the discussion we've already had on political space? Does that sound alright?
Yeah, sounds good. Let's go for that.
Right, well, while our alter egos head towards Doncaster then, in the car, we can maybe introduce the episode properly. So here we are again for Little Bigger Anarchism, episode 2.
Yeah.
Although in between episode 1 and 2 we did have a trip to the book fair. How did you find that?
I really liked it. It was my first time at the book fair since I can remember, at least probably 6 years since, it was good. It was good meeting some new people, seeing some old faces, and after not being in London for a long time, being amazed at how many new faces there are around as well, and how many people I don't know.
I think we did okay to get a 45-minute podcast out there from just walking around and chatting to the people that we found who were willing to discuss. Maybe if we'd had more time, we perhaps could have done it a little bit better, a little bit differently. What do you think?
I think so, yeah. I think we kind of talked to Freedom quite a bit, and ASN, which is kind of like, understandable. They're kind of the waters we swim in. But it would be good to kind of talk to more of the wider movement, and maybe some of the new groups or collectives or initiatives that I haven't interacted with before, but that would be for another book fair.
Well, I was thinking that maybe we could have actually put a workshop on. Maybe we could do a Little Bigger Anarchism live.
Yeah, perhaps
maybe.
next year.
Like
Yeah, that would be an option. Yeah,
we'll see. What else have you been up to then since we got the first podcast out?
Currently, I've come to the end of my PhD, so I'm nearing my viva, so I'm getting a little stressed about that. I want to carry on researching, do some more research on anarchism. Particularly the link between Thomas Paine and anarchism. So I'm currently stressed out with postdoc application how, and then I'm working as well at the moment, like TAing, which isn't which is taking up more time than I want it to.
Territorial Army, is that what that's?
Oh no, nothing as exciting as that. Just TA and just teaching assistant.
I see.
Yeah.
That's hard work as well, isn't it? And it's, I think with a lot of, well, we've mentioned it before. I think we mentioned it when we were talking to Jim at the book fair, that working in academia or having been in academia doesn't mean that you're suddenly elevated to some brilliant academic position.
No, not at all. It's a massive grind, and for most people it doesn't even pay off. So it's a pretty horrific.
Which is why I decided
sector.
not to go into it. But as a result of that as well, life is economically precarious. So it's all good fun.
Yeah.
I spend my time tutoring in A-level politics, and really depends on how many students I get as to whether I'm comfortably paying my rent or not. And this time of year it's a little bit quiet.
Yeah.
But since we last did the podcast, I decided I felt a little bit burnt out after the exam period when I was very, very busy. And I thought, well, I've got a little bit of money saved up and I needed a break. So I went off to Stratford-upon-Avon for a few days, which was lovely. Yeah. And it was nice and warm still. And I've never been there before, and I just did the full tourist stuff. And it was just after the schools had started back. So like the week they started back, so there were no crowds.
Oh.
So I was able to go around all of the museums without being crowded, and took in a play which was very, very difficult to follow. I didn't know it very well, and that's always a risk with Shakespeare, I think. But I had a nice time. It was really good. It was good to get away, and and now the autumn beckons.
Autumn in Loughborough.
Fantastic. Are you reading anything interesting?
Actually, yeah, I'm related. I'm a big fan of Stefan Zweig, who in the mid-20th century was one of the biggest European authors and is today largely forgotten. His political legacy is somewhat debated, whether he's kind of like a radical liberal or an anarchist. But I'm reading his autobiography, The World of Yesterday, which he wrote in the 40s. And he was born in the late 19th century, so he was part of the generation that went through the Depression, the two wars, and all this precariousness. And there's an affinity when you read his work, especially being a millennial, coming of age during two once in a lifetime economic crashes and the pandemic and all this stuff, and it's kind of you read his frustration and he's kind of this hauntology, if you will, of the life that could have been. So and that runs through all of his work. So I've been reading that and kind of having a deep affinity with this dude who's been dead for nearly 100 years now.
So I mean, we've talked about not reading anarchism a bit, haven't we?
Right.
Over the last couple of weeks. So how's that going? What reason do you have for not reading so much anarchism these days?
I think it's just because I so intensely read it for the last 3.5 years. It's just nice to have space to breathe and do other stuff. It's nothing against reading anarchist literature. I will start up again very soon, but and just also letting all the stuff that I read digest as well. Yeah, and just kind of let that settle. And then I've always liked to read widely anyway. I think the most interesting people that I talk to are those that read widely. You can always tell the kind of politicals who just read political philosophy, if you will, and you can hear it in their thinking and that. So
it's quite usual, isn't it, for people who specialise in something also to have pretty good kind of general base knowledge of the general area that they specialise in.
Yeah, no, I'm also a big fan of those kind of old school intellectuals that read widely, like Paul Goodman and Alex Comfort and Colin Ward and these ones that they have their speciality, but they're widely read and they're well rounded. They're kind of like John Dewey's school, if you will, intellectualism. I kind of like that, and I wouldn't dare put myself in that company, but that's how I approach my reading as well.
When I did my PhD, obviously I had to focus on certain bits of literature, certain areas of anarchism that were pertinent to what I was writing about and what I was researching. And what I really enjoyed once it had finished was that I could read generally about anarchism again, and not with that specific focus. So I'm reading Disaster Anarchy at the moment by Rhiannon Firth.
Nice.
So something a bit more modern compared to what you just described, and really enjoying that. I picked that up at the book fair. I suppose the other thing that's going on is the American football season started. So I know that you're a big fan of that. Are you taking that in?
That's a sore subject.
Is that because your team's not done as well as expected?
No, and also the quarterback, which is the star player for those who don't watch it, is injured for most of the season. So it's week 3, and then the team I support, their season's pretty much over already. So it's maybe next September it'll be more exciting.
Okay.
It's
one thing that people might think is that we spend a lot of time talking about anarchism.
Yeah.
In our socially, we don't, do we? Actually,
no.
we've spent most of the time socially at sporting events.
That's right. Yeah.
Normally on campus at Loughborough University, because it's a sports university.
Yeah.
We've even seen American football there.
Yeah.
Which was interesting for me to watch it because you understand it much better than I do. So that was really helpful to grasp some of the things that were going on that I didn't fully grasp before. But yeah, it's a great place to be to watch sport, isn't it, Loughborough, really?
Yeah, it's it really is. Yeah, there's always football on, some good rugby, great tennis as well. I like tennis centre. We got some great players there, so I'll go and watch that often and everything. It's an odd place, Loughborough. Especially for people who go there to study anarchism.
For radicals, it is a very odd kind of space. But there we go. We're here. We're stuck here.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to leave. No. Apparently, once you're here, other people do. I hear.
Yeah.
So there we go. Okay, that's good. So I think what would be useful now is to kind of say thank you to the people who listened to the first episode and the bonus episode. It seems to have been well received. We haven't had a lot of feedback to the email address, but I'm sure that will come at some point. But generally speaking, people seem to have enjoyed it when they've got in touch with us via other means to say that they've listened. How can people go about supporting us?
Well, just sharing, just spreading, sharing our link to the podcast. Whatever platform you listen to the podcast, give it a good review, and shoot us an email, and also the reception's been good, so we're going to carry on, and we want to talk to more people, which will mean traveling around a little bit. So also now, if people feel so inclined and they want to shoot us some donations to help cover the travel costs, we want to buy a nice mic or mics so the sound quality improves and everything. We've set up a little donation account with Ko-fi. If anyone wants to shoot us a donation, help with the project, it's Ko-fi/Little Bigger Anarchism. There you can just drop us a few quid or whatever you want, and help us talk to more people and grow. Hopefully.
How is Ko-fi spelled on that?
Ko-fi ko-fi.com/Little Bigger Anarchism.
Brilliant. Well, that would be really helpful. I mean, we're not massively out of pocket, but what we want to do is make these as good as possible and get out to as many people as we can, and obviously a little bit of money to help us along the way would be really great. So thank you very much. How can people contact us as well if they want to give us feedback?
Yeah, still a little bigger anarchism @gmail.com. Just shoot us an email, and
Excellent. Did you say that already?
I did, but that's
okay.
okay.
No, we'll keep that in. Brilliant. Sorry, I was obviously thinking about other things. So our alter egos are in a car heading on the way to Doncaster to Bentley Urban Farm.
Right.
And what there is at Bentley Urban Farm, and I know I said earlier that we'd had the political chat already and we'd play that, but actually we went to Bentley Urban Farm before.
Yeah.
And now we're having the political chat. It's all very timey-wimey, very odd thing going on. However, what we can say about Bentley Urban Farm is that there is a nice physical space, which people are going to hear about shortly, where people are able to organise things. But what I wanted to do was kind of use our opportunity to talk about British politics by thinking about political space.
Right.
Because obviously when we think of space, we think of it as a physical thing. But it seems to me that following our discussion on British politics last time, which was a bit epic and went through quite a broad sweep of British politics, things have developed in the more recent past, I would say, or the kind of medium term, in quite an interesting way. What we've seen is the development of a kind of political space opening up in a way that could be quite useful to the Labour Party if they want to occupy it and if they can occupy it. And what I kind of mean by it is that, and I wrote about this in an article for the printed edition of Freedom that was available at the book fair and people can get from the Freedom website, and we'll put a link to everything that we need to put a link to in our show notes. Basically, I wrote about how since the pandemic particularly, people are being used to state intervention more, and actually people are like kind of ready for state intervention.
Right.
Now this could be quite uncomfortable for us anarchists.
Yeah.
But basically people were accepting of a lockdown or two during COVID. They were accepting of a furlough scheme, which is perhaps even more significant because financial intervention, a large state, has not been on the agenda in that way for a very, very long time. And indeed, just months before COVID struck, Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party, which was proposing quite large-scale state interventions in the economy, was obviously sent packing, as Boris Johnson might describe it, in the election of December 2019. Things seem to have moved. Things seem to have shifted. And people seem to be much more ready for the state to get involved in the economy. And that, I think, is interesting during a cost of living crisis.
Right.
Just the phrase cost of living crisis is odd as well, because a few years ago it was used by Ed Miliband to describe how people were facing austerity when he was Labour leader.
Yeah.
And nobody really picked it. Nobody kind of used the phrase other than him and the rest of the Labour Party at the time.
Yeah.
This time, everybody's using
Well, it
cost of living
affects
crisis.
the middle class as well now, doesn't it?
Good point. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe that's the difference. But for the Tories to use it as well, or they have been doing recently, which is perhaps significant. But so we've got this potential space that Labour could occupy that some people might call it the centre ground, but there's lots of difficulties in describing the centre ground in British politics. It's largely a meaningless phrase. But as we're recording this, it's on the afternoon of Keir Starmer's conference speech, which I've listened to, because I heard it on the radio when I was walking around Loughborough earlier, but I don't think you're aware of.
No, I just read the articles last night about what's leaked that's going to be in it, which from what I picked up today was pretty accurate. But like also what you've kind of missed also was the Queen died, and with that, you know, about that, yeah. You know, now King Charles, that's, you know, the Queen has been buried now, and you know, King Charles probably won't be crowned until the spring now, you would think. So again, that's another like new thing, like a new period where, you know, the country, the nation can redefine itself in a way, you know. So that's opened up space as well. You know, Charles, for whatever reason, Queen Elizabeth II was popular among a lot of people. Yeah, I think Charles doesn't have that popularity, at least, you know, it seems so. So that kind of, you know, if he's crowned in the spring, that would be 6 months since her death. You know, that's enough time passed where you could have real Republican conversations. You know,
it's all very difficult to predict, and it feels sometimes when you're talking about politics, it feels like you should be trying to predict the future, rather than just trying to analyse what's going on right now. Right. It's hard enough to analyse what's going on right now. I don't know how people are going to feel about the monarchy in 6-12 months' time. It tends to be the case that changes in the way people feel kind of do fluctuate, but fluctuate over decades rather than, you know, specific instance. I get the feeling, but who knows? One thing we haven't also mentioned yet is Liz Truss is Prime Minister.
Right.
And I've been surprised by her because, being cynical, I kind of thought she must be lying about her plans for tax cuts.
No,
she couldn't possibly be truthful in suggesting what she was suggesting. But there we go. Last Friday, we had this thing called a mini budget, which was actually really huge. But because they framed it in the way they did, they didn't have to be scrutinised in the way that a budget is normally scrutinised, and they didn't need to provide forecasts and paperwork with it. But it had the instant impact of forcing the pound down against the dollar, and I'm no expert in economics, so I don't really understand all of that, but it has not been well received by anybody other than arch Thatcherite neoliberals, it seems.
Yeah, yeah. Even the city are reacted negatively. There's the old Treasury Secretary of the Treasury Secretary, whatever, of the United States.
Permanent. Oh yes, yes.
Who was condemning it as well. It's kind of, across the board. It seems to be condemned and seen as a gamble, a risky gamble.
So one of the things to do with political space when it opens up, and so there's the potential of this mass of people, this generalised view of the British population suddenly, or not suddenly, but gradually getting used to the idea of state intervention in the economy and even liking it. So you got that happening. How do you deal with that? Well, the opportunities for the Labour Party are to try to occupy that space and to keep that space excited by the idea of some policies, which is exactly what Keir Starmer attempted to do today. And so I've got to be careful because I sometimes get accused of endorsing Labour politicians when I say they've done vaguely a competent job.
Right.
His speech was very competent.
Yeah.
He delivered it well, and there are policies that occupy the space. Right. So I think Labour, in at least the short term, will be feeling as though that their conference has been a success, although there's maybe more days to come yet, so it could all go off the rails. But certainly my initial response to hearing the speech was that not only has he noticed this political space, but he wants to utilise it. Now, I didn't know when I thought, well, let's talk about political space a few weeks ago, I didn't realise that Liz Truss was going to suddenly have this mini budget with new Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng offering all of these tax cuts to the very rich. And I think what she's doing is also utilising her opportunities, but in a slightly different way. The opportunities you have in government are obviously that you can actually set the agenda, you can actually potentially try to move the space with you. So she's left this political space. The Tory party 2 weeks ago were firmly in the political space of state intervention to a certain extent, with a scheme to help people pay their energy bills. But by having the budget that they've had, Liz Truss's new administration in this 12-year Conservative government has kind of vacated that political space. What they're hoping is that the economy will pick up, people will feel a bit better, and then people, when a general election comes along, people will be happy to back them again. Huge risks being taken by both political parties, and actually now some real clear space between the Tories and Labour.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's different, isn't it? Because the last time there was that big ideological shift with Thatcher, Thatcher's attack on big government and everything. Like the context was completely different. We've had 15 years of austerity and government aid shrinking, and as you just said, now there's this more like kind of rebounding of, hey, actually state intervention is seen as more of a good thing now, and Liz Truss wants to go push against that tide, and and saying stuff that with the tax cuts and people calling her out and being like, well, this benefits people who make more money, and her doubling down and being like, yeah, they should get more money back on these tax cuts, and now lifting the cap on bankers' bonuses and everything. That's I think that's a harder ideological and fight, a battleground, and discourse as well, public discourse, that's harder to win, I think, than Thatcher's Thatcher's rhetoric of unions holding the nation hostage, and holding business and free trade hostage, or free trade and business has been unshackled for 15 years, and it's got us in this mess. So I think the context is completely different, and I don't Liz Truss likes to model herself on people. She doesn't actually have an identity or seem to have a personality of her own, whereas Thatcher did. So I think she's just going to fall flat on her face.
I think your gut instinct's right. But what I would say is she doesn't have that kind of character herself yet. if she succeeds in what she's doing and the economy actually picks up and people start to decide that they will vote Tory again, then she becomes that new person, and it's worked, and we have to forget what we thought. Yeah, and it's up for grabs. And I think also, it's I agree with you. Like, it's worth I think reflecting on the fact that Margaret Thatcher didn't come into government in 1979 and do everything that she said. Didn't do everything that she's ultimately remembered for. It wasn't really until winning in 1983 that she was able to take command in the way that she wanted to, and that comes down again to some political space opening up. So the 83 elections, I think, is more interesting than 1979 in a way. And often it is kind of characterised as being an election that was won because of the Falklands War. And I think Falklands was important, but not as important as the creation of the SDP, the split from Labour. Because that split from Labour and the subsequent electoral pact that they had with the Liberal Party created this alliance which didn't stand against each other and took a whole load of Labour votes from it. So often Michael Foot's Labour Party is characterised through its 1983 manifesto, which is said to be the longest suicide note in history. Actually, some of the things that are in that manifesto we actually have now, like a Freedom of Information bill and withdrawal from the EEC as it was then. Right. But what that election meant for Labour, regardless of the fact, not regardless of the fact that they shifted to the left, because it's significant with the fact that was the reason for the SDP being created in the first place. But they lost a whole load of votes through that, which is significant. The alliance, the SDP and the Liberals combined got 25% of the vote, but only, I think, 11 seats. And Labour got about 27% of the vote, and enough to be in opposition. So it's that gave that created the political space for Margaret Thatcher to become powerful and to take on the unions. Right. It allowed her to basically defeat social democracy, and properly kind of move towards that new right agenda that she'd already started. Yeah.
And so we're talking about space as well, and the Labour Party today. They want to occupy that space that Liz Truss has given up, but it's not a social democratic program that they're proposing. Peter Mandelson is back in the picture. And the articles I've been reading, starting talking about New Labour again, and Tony Blair is weaseling his way back in to influence. So and Keir Starmer is, he's a New Labour guy. So it's kind of it's interesting. Really, it's kind of I'm not sure what the kind of left in Britain's going to make of this as well. The kind of momentum people and Navarra people kind of, because this isn't the Labour Party that they want, and Starmer and that isn't really. Well, he's never really offered anything concrete, but right now he's not offering anything radical. It's what is he really offering? More kind of if Liz Truss is neoliberalism on steroids, he's just let's go back to neoliberalism light. So it's kind of space is opening up, but we're still within this ideological framework.
I think so. Some of the things that struck me when I was listening to the speech today was he used the phrase working people a lot, but he also actually used the phrase working class quite a bit, which is a phrase that Labour have been really reluctant to use apart from during the Corbyn years. In fact, I can't remember Jeremy Corbyn using it much, actually. He used it specifically to describe his upbringing and to describe himself. So a clear message to Labour supporters that he's working class, a clear message to people in red wall seats perhaps that he's working class or considers himself working class. So the language was quite interesting. There is a New Labour, there's a touch of New Labour about him But to be honest, some of the policies which you won't be aware of were quite interesting. So this idea that they're going to try, if they get into power, to kind of transform the energy market towards green energy. They talked about creating a nationally owned business to kind of run that Great British Energy. There's a lot of patriotism in his speech as well. He was really focused on patriotism, and earlier on in the conference they sang "God Save the King," and looked incredibly uncomfortable doing it. I felt uncomfortable just watching it, to be honest. But so I think there are some things that the left will really love about what he's announced today.
Right.
And so there are some policies out there which were brand new, really. But a lot of it, with any leader's speech at conference, a lot of it is rhetoric. The rhetoric, I think, was designed to please all wings of the party. The other thing about the Labour Party, though, is that whoever's in power, left or right in the Labour Party, the other side are going to harp. The other side are going to go on that they don't like whoever's in power.
Yeah, but the left side will always be the pushovers in those two.
Yeah. I mean,
and go along for the sake of the scraps that you get on the table. And he's talking about working class now, but there's a growing union movement now that's kind of coming back, and he's looking to appeal to people who like Mike Lynch, Mick Lynch, yeah, like him, like his crowd. That's who he's appealing to, and it's kind of, and people like this would be like, you can push Starmer, and I'm not convinced that you can. Like, let's look at the way that he got rid of Corbyn and Corbyn's allies when he went in. You think he's not going to be like that when he's in power? I mean, I don't trust him one bit. I'm not sure really how much he can be pushed.
I think there's lots to dislike about him.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think the chances of us ever being satisfied by government are pretty slim.
No, but like at the same time, it's like, I think like someone like a Corbyn kind of like government and that program would be kind of actually what we would need a little bit to push like society a little bit more. I'm just not because we need to get out the paradigm of neoliberalism, and I'm not convinced Starmer's going to do that.
No, I'm not yet.
If he goes in on that program, you're confining us to another 15 years of neoliberalism.
Yeah. I mean, so one of the things he obviously wants to do is to kind of not spook business. He actually wants business people to support him, and that is going to mean that he's going to have to kind of distance himself a little bit from more left-wing politics, I guess, isn't it? If he wants the support of business people, and some of that support is going to be there because the economy. One of the focuses of his speech was talking about how the Tories have made the economy chaotic.
Right.
Which works right now, but it does depend on whether it stays chaotic.
Yeah.
But yeah, he is going to be courting business, and that so there's a compromise. There's always a trade-off, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, in public discourse, there's a trade-off, but is there really a trade-off in the background? Like, does he really, want to push us really like left? Does he really want to push us outside of the neoliberal paradigm? I'm not convinced. No,
I see. I take your point. I think that what he really wants is votes.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of narrative on the Labour right of how you achieve that, how you get votes, and a lot of it is about this kind of idea of aspiration, and appealing to people who want to better themselves through hard work, and it's undoubtedly you end up saying very, very similar things to neoliberals who might talk about people being rewarded for hard work and wealth creation and all the rest of it. But it remains to be seen. I think what's interesting about it, though, thinking about political space, is I think in the immediate few weeks, I would say, I think Labour's got the agenda. I think Labour's in a position now to occupy that space. what happens now is very much dependent on how the economy works. And obviously, being in government gives you the opportunity to actually kind of set that agenda by doing things.
Yeah.
And if the Truss government now does things that gets the economy working and again, that people feel, like the general population start to feel happier, then what does Starmer do then? How does Starmer counteract that?
Yeah, I'm just not sure it's going to get to that. I mean, the city clearly have turned on Liz Truss and seem to be going towards Camp Starmer, and that's 50% of the getting elected right there. Bank of England hasn't played ball, hasn't raised interest rates. That speaks to the city not supporting her plan. So I just don't really see any way out for the British economy right now. It's just I'm just resigned for another year or two of just.
Well, the election could be another 2 years away, and on current forecasts, Labour have got a big lead, but also there might be boundary changes which are likely to help the Conservatives more. So it could be that even though they've got a big lead, if there was a general election, there could still be a hung parliament.
Well, who do the Lib Dems jump in bed with this time?
Well, I mean, they've. The thing is that they've all said that they won't do a deal with whoever they don't want to do a deal with. But I think when it really what it comes down to is the arithmetic of the House of Commons and to see whether they like power or not. And I think the truth of the matter is that they'll like power if they can get it. But that could be a long way off now. But there we go. Political space. You have to try to utilise it. And when COVID started and we saw the furlough scheme and we had Boris Johnson in power talking about being a one nation Conservative government, it was difficult to know exactly what kind of government he kind of was going to lead. And of course he never really had that long to show what he would do. So it was quite difficult to say whether he was neoliberal, whether he was one nation Conservative or whatever. With Truss, we know where we stand.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I think we just know where we stand now, and we can see that government, the current Conservative government, hasn't gone down a straightforward path at all.
Yeah, and she doesn't have that boisterous banter that Boris Johnson does that can get him out of trouble he shouldn't be getting out of as well. So, she's going to be judged. I think, she's going to be judged differently, and it's going to be a higher standard for her as well than Boris Johnson.
So, political space, there we are.
Yeah. But I think, for, coming from, a kind of anarchist position, I think the space in, kind of, that's opened up here in kind of mainstream politics, capital P politics, if you will, for me as, kind of revolutionary, I would be looking for, us to be moving away from thinking within the neoliberal, political economic framework and getting out of that. That's why, I wouldn't have if we had a Corbynist person, it'd be vote Corbyn, esque whatever, without illusions, because it'll be pushing more towards that and then opening a space for us to then talk about anarchism a little bit more and everything and push it even more. And this is what almost breaks my heart really that we have Starmer, because I don't think he can be pushed outside of that. And there's this space now, this opportunity now, and I think that it's going to be squandered.
Well, one of the problems I foresee is that we move from a narrative. Well, we've got a choice between kind of small state economics or state involvement, and that is frustrating. That is the debate that's going on in British politics right now. Two different parties with two different agendas. One is saying that they want the state to be more involved, and this political space that's opened up seems to suggest that the public like that. What about us? How do we get involved with talking to people about anarchist ideas, it might offer some opportunities, because naturally when people become more interested in the state involved in their lives, they are showing some kind of willingness for a collective response to issues. And that perhaps provides us with an opportunity to do things collectively.
Yeah.
And maybe that is what we can focus on.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say kind of collectivist. It would be instead of privatizing social issues, we socialize social issues. So that makes sense.
Right. Socialize rather than collectivize.
Yeah, I would say, because I don't think that it's really kind of collectivist in any kind of meaningful sense, having government corporations running things.
Yeah, no. What I mean is that people might be more willing to have a discussion along those lines.
I take that. But I would, that's what I would say.
Which is kind of what's going on at Bentley Urban Farm, isn't it?
Right,
People have got a physical space that they can utilise, and maybe there's opportunities to kind of expand that idea and have more kind of mutual aid type things going on generally in society, because people perhaps are more willing to have that kind of discussion now.
And if this state intervention puts more money in people's pockets, have the means to be able to do things as well, and the time.
Shall we see if our alter egos have got there?
Let's do it.
Brilliant, fantastic. All right, let's do that. Okay, well, we made it. We're here with Warren Draper at Bentley Urban Farm. Warren's going to show us around.
Okay,
hopefully.
So everything you see is made from reclaimed materials. We call it an upcycled market garden because we use waste materials to teach people how to grow and save money food growing. It started as an anti-food poverty campaign. So the first thing we did was put in these raised beds made from various materials.
Oh, I see.
Taught people how to grow, and people that got good at it, because there's not a problem with land access on personal houses in Doncaster. They mostly got gardens. So we bought produce back from people for our veg box scheme that we used to run. It's on hold at the moment, but we're hoping to start it up again soon.
How big is the area?
It's less than an acre.
Yeah, okay. You've
Just
done a
under
lot
an
with a
acre.
small space.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's an open door policy, so it's we let anybody try something. They've got an idea, we make it happen. So it's just an open door and a yes.
What I'm intrigued by, I think we're both intrigued by, is how you got access to this area.
Right, so myself and Rachel Horn started Doncapolitan magazine, which was a magazine to prove there was no such thing as a cultural desert, which was a slur aimed at Doncaster. So we had it as a podcast, blog, radio show, until we got a bit of funding to make a print issue in 2014. And then the head of the council, Joe Miller, the head of the Time, subscribed to the magazine. And we've been after this site for a few years. It'd been empty about 5-6 years when we got it. And we're just falling apart. So it gave us Joe Miller was a big fan of Doncapolitan. She even used the term Doncapolitanism for the attitude of sort of the positive attitude about changing Doncaster, because it's all about changing the stories, just telling a more positive story. Because we've got sort of great microclimate, we've got one of the most diverse soils maps in the country according to the Soil Association. So there's a lot of reasons to be cheerful about Doncaster, which is Ed Miliband's he's actually based over there, Ed Miliband.
Oh, really?
His podcast, isn't it? But yeah, so we had a conversation with Joe Miller, and she let us take it over, and we're volunteer led. We've had some small pots of funding, but mostly it's because we use waste materials and allowed us to keep it going all this time. Really, it's been a bit of a struggle, but there's so many people have been involved, especially during lockdown when they weren't allowed to use their traditional venues. They came to the site and realised how good it was for a meeting space. So so we started as anti-food poverty, but we quickly learnt that there were schools, more affluent schools in the area, where the kids were eating out the freezer, latchkey kids. So it became about relationships with food. So we started doing more about getting people to eat together and more events. And then when lockdown came, we opened the site up, hence the therapy room that was created by a guy called Glenn Monks. And then lots of artists needed space, musicians, so there's art, music. We built the commensality kitchen area just there, named after Clarissa Honeywell, whose book Anarchism is one of my favourite at the moment, introduced me to the word commensality, which is bonding through food. And when you speak to anybody from whatever background about that kind of it just works, doesn't it? So we built the kitchen, we're building a pizza oven and a little cafe area, and we're going to have more food available here, and warm spaces for when the cost of living crisis really kicks in.
And earlier on, when we were communicating online, you said that Tuesdays, we were recording this on a Tuesday, it's kind of like a volunteer day, and you said that they mainly come in the morning. So we've missed most of them, haven't we?
Most of the volunteers today,
so what does that mean? What is a volunteer day down here?
So we, because at points it's just been me, we have certain days, Tuesdays and Fridays and Saturday afternoons, where anybody can come along. But it also, so the bed over there, that's run by Mind. So they create their own bed there. They come in every Tuesday morning. Lots of the beds get adopted either by individuals or by groups.
I see.
And they can come down. A lot of people just want to come down just to be out in nature and just feel for the right relaxation. Really, it's sort of a natural therapy space.
Yeah, and we're in
sort of music and yeah.
So are we in the thick of Doncaster here?
It's the first town you hit going north from Doncaster on the A19. It's a former mining town with all the problems that comes with.
Yeah.
But we do attract people from all over Doncaster. Weirdly enough, we won an international award from Abundant Earth, and we came second to a farm in Kenya. So I think we've been to up our game a bit, really. But yeah. So we're still doing the work to. There's still people that don't know we're here locally. It's a little bit off the beaten track, but.
So I see you've got some solar panels as well. So is a
that's
lot
the
of this funded? Is a lot of this kind of powered by?
Yes.
There?
Yeah, our inverter's is gone, but we've So when the Workers' Educational Association started during lockdown, they used the site right until December, January. They were using the polytunnel as a classroom. The end of it we've converted into a classroom. But then it got too cold for that, so we've been building this out of old pallets and an old shed as an off-grid classroom. So we just need to finish off, get a new inverter. But it does power up, it runs off-grid. But it also, when we did the festival, it's the perfect stage. So we're going to have modular walls that fasten on and off through the winter as a heated space, as a classroom that anybody can use again.
So
Any group that needs it.
You mentioned festivals and you mentioned like a teaching space. So what sort of things are people going to be learning and what festivals are you putting on?
We do regular music workshops. Every Saturday every other Saturday we have a jamming session, and in between we have music workshops. We have offbeat, which is off-grid electronic music making. So Jen, who now performs as Jack now, she was one of the first students, and she's like a transgender acid queen, who's now gigging from those. So we work with the Skin Tones, which is a local jam band, lots of djembes and things, so anybody can join in. And we often use this file circle, which is made out of old filing cabinets again that we buried. We'll often jam in this space, and people can just pick up percussion or any instrument and start learning music through osmosis, really.
Yeah,
it's
with
also,
a campfire going at the same time.
Absolutely, yeah. It's also used on a Wednesday night. It is, we believe, the only outdoor Narcotics Anonymous meeting space, because they come from all over. They come from Manchester, Hull, just because the sort of word of mouth has carried about this space, really, meeting outdoors. And circles work really well for any group.
Yeah, sure.
So the NA love it. They're here every Wednesday.
Wonderful.
And what kind of things are being taught here in the classroom, or will be?
It varies because because we're volunteer-led, we kind of just open the space up to people.
Right.
So the WEA, they teach adult literacy, they teach kids crafts, things like that. Emma, who's one of our directors, she teaches a lot of kids crafts, also foraging, any interest that comes up. So a lot of it is horticultural and permaculture. But really, it's if anybody comes to us with an idea, such as Glenn, who wanted a therapy room. So now we have various therapists on site, and they're doing workshops around whatever therapists do. Yeah. And we also do lots of arts workshops. We're doing quite a few for the next festival, so we're doing a lot of arts workshops there, just making a giant puppet. And we get people involved with that. We're making some bunting flags. I've actually made a gallery out of the old walk tower. This was never used. The liner had split and it's rusted out, so we saw a little trick online with toothpicks on a bottle, and that's where we got the idea for the roof from.
So what is this made from?
This is an old water tower.
Oh, I
see.
see.
We put a door into it. We made this roof. It's got a lovely reverb, so quite often the guitarists like to play in it as well.
Yeah.
But during the festivals, it's surrounded by art, and there's the swivel chair in the middle, and people just turn around. And they actually sold quite a few artworks using it. So yeah.
That's quite a nice use of a circular space, isn't it?
I love
just sit in the middle
spaces,
and turn around and observe what there is.
Yeah, we should have roundhouses, shouldn't we? The devil lives in corners, apparently.
Excellent.
They've just had a clothes swap, which is why that was this weekend's event. I mean, it's hard to remember exactly what we do because we do so much now. But space itself seems to be the most important thing.
Well, some of the things you've written for Freedom News have been about veganism, haven't they? So talk to us, how does this fit into your vision there?
Technically, we're vegan permaculture. We're vegan organic. We don't have licenses in anything like that, but they're the techniques we teach. We try to encourage everything that's done on site to be vegan. Personally, I believe that sort of universal veganism is the easiest way for people to start taking care of some of their food needs. It's something that can be done anywhere with just a small amount of access to land and things. So it seems, if you wanted to eat pork, you could technically run a pig club, but then you would have to still go through DEFRA to slaughter the pig.
You'd also have to probably grow some fruit and veg to feed it, which is what you're doing anyway, isn't it, to a certain extent?
And it's also, life feeds on life, but you don't need to take two lives when you can take one, do you? So it's kind of, So we tend to encourage it. We do let people who want to do a barbecue eat meat and things like that, but we really stress how the benefits really of plant-based and eating less meat.
And
in terms of resources as well.
And what's being grown here that is... so is there food stuff being grown here?
There is, not as much as usual because of lockdown, so we're just sort of getting back into the swing of things. And we also grow... we tend to grow unusual varieties. There's Yacon, which is a tuber, South American tuber, that looks like a potato but tastes like watermelon.
Oh, wow.
That won't be ready until January, unfortunately.
Oh, now you tell us.
Yeah. It's got a really nice leaf. And then this is...
Oh, this is quite a big greenhouse, isn't it?
So we grow such as this is 5-leaf ginseng, which we make a tea from. We also made an actual gin from it, and we've grown some cucumber melons, which they're related to cucumber, and cucumber melons are small cucumbers that look like watermelons again.
Yeah.
We froze them and use them as ice cubes. And then we do various tomatoes. I haven't got any this year, but we usually do a pocketbook, which is a type of plum that fuses together. A bit like that one.
Yeah.
That's actually come from that's a cross-pollinated one. But it looks like a brain when it's growing. But you could pull a piece off at a time and the rest stays fresh. So that was the idea with those. So various tomatoes. Again, this is usually a tunnel of tomatoes, but just over the last couple of years when we've had to sort of step back, it's scale things back. We just kept it really simple. This is Ocker, which is quite a lot on the site, which is another South American tuber. So it looks like a knobbly new potato.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, it's an impressive space. Would it be good to go and have a little sit-down chat about it?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so we're here with Warren and Emma to talk about Bentley Urban Farm some more. Oh, there's more people as well.
Oh, this is Jen I was talking about. Actually. Hello. Jen, the acid queen, aren't you? You've come to perform, like? Or you just come to...
Jam, yeah,
we're recording a podcast. Unless you want to do the music. This is John and Shay. So from, was it Little Bigger
Anarchism.
Anarchism podcast.
Alright, cool.
Jen's an anarchist as well. You can join us if you like.
Yeah, why not?
Jen likes to come and choose the equipment most.
So we've got Warren, Emma, and Jen then in that case. So yeah, do you want to start, Shane?
I mean, it's you got so much going on here. How long has the project been going?
So we will be 7 years in next month, actually. Yeah.
Ooh, lucky 7.
Yeah. Yes. So I think working it out. 2016. What are we on now? 7 years. Yeah.
Wow.
6
6 years.
6 years.
6 years been going. Yeah.
And then it started with a collective, like a small collective. Has that grown? Is it?
It started. So we used to run the social enterprise behind Bentley Urban Farm is Permafuture Agroecology Limited, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's because we used to run a project called Permafuture, which was about upcycling and waste streams. Then we folded that. Then we started lots of guerrilla gardening. We used to do Doncaster Urban Growers, and we created Permafuture Agroecology because of the stuff we were doing there. So it existed just as we got the use of this space. So that was with a guy called John Briggs, who unfortunately sort of got cold feet when he realised there's not a lot of money to be made in it. So I wasn't supposed to be running it. I was working elsewhere at the time, but realised it was such a good opportunity that I sort of decided to try and find out as much about growing as I could. Crammed loads of books. Did a bit of permaculture with Graham Burnett, but it turned out that life wants to live, and plants, if you treat them right, they grow, don't they? So yeah, so there's a lot of just finding. So we experiment with where we put plants and find the right spaces for them. We'll plant in various sites and just let them do their thing, and also plant in ecologies. So in the greenhouse there was those steps, because really all plants want is light on the leaves and shade on the roots. So we just design it so they get that and aid each other with that. So.
Wow. So whenever I'm involved in anything, acquiring space is always the hard part. So just kind of just go. You touched on it briefly before, but more like, how did you acquire the land? Was it kind of a deal with the local council?
Yeah,
or?
yeah. It was only because of that, because of Doncapolitan, that we built up trust with the council, but also trust with residents.
Right.
So we were acting as mediators really with the council and residents, and it would just get us in a good position. And also, early issues of Doncapolitan are full of these ideas of what we were saying. So I lost my house in the credit crunch and started writing for the Idler about the skills you need to protect yourself from poverty. And we wrote about that in Doncapolitan as well, and looked at it on a civic scale. And then having access to this, we were allowed to build that really. So land is the most vital thing, and it's the hardest thing. I think we're third only to Colombia and Brazil when it comes to equity, land equity.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing in England and sort of the UK in general. That's why we open the space out to anybody that's interested, because it is the hardest thing to do. We've done various guerrilla stuff before in squatted land. And even this isn't completely secure. We've got a really good deal with the council because we tick a lot of boxes on their green boxes and ecology, things like that. But we know that it's not completely secure. So there's always going to be issues around land access.
Does it affect how radical you are, that knowing that they could get annoyed, or do you just go for it?
Well, we just go for it, and if it does come to crunch time, we've squatted before, we'll do it again as a protest. So but I call myself as an anarcho-pragmatist because I'm quite open with the council. They all know I'm an anarchist. And when I started this with the council, Tom Hodgkinson, the editor of the Idler, said, you and bureaucrats, he couldn't really sort of see the fit, but it's worked quite well. And it's individually, the people in the council are great. It's systematically the problem, hierarchies and systems and the usual stuff that we're all fighting against as anarchists, really. But unless you are prepared to work with people who have access to space like this, then it's going to be very hard to change anything. And you also need to meet people where they are. So So we'll have, if you can walk around, there's lots of anarchist stickers and books, and the kind of everything we do, we like to teach through osmosis. So we even had a collection of, there's a lot of children are in alternate provision now, so instead of being excluded, they do a 12-week program, which is pretty bad because at the end of 12 weeks they go straight back to square one. But it does massage the figures for exclusion, so there's lots of kids. So we work with lots of alternate providers, and one of them came down. They were making their own newsletter, and we were talking about growing and permaculture, and I accidentally slipped in anarchism, and they said, "What's that?" And 40 minutes later, we'd had a really good chat about anarchy, and they all just said, "Well, that seems to make a lot of sense." So we will sort of be quite open in talking about anarchy and veganism, as you asked earlier. Yeah. So.
And is everybody anarchists around the table?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, what Warren said about anarcho-pragmatism, I mean, yeah, there's a certain thing, like, I'm the kind of anarchist, like, it's more interested in building things than just, like, thinking I'm going to go down to, like, London and start a fight, be part of a black bloc kind of thing. I mean, black bloc's great and everything, but it's like, I think you achieve stuff by building stuff like what we've got here.
We like to live the example here and show people an alternative reality as possible. And it's very much about leading through example, and people will meet you there when they're ready.
So what is that more specifically? Leading by example in what way? What is it about Bentley Urban Farm that's anarchist? You've got some anarchist stickers, but what else is it?
I mean, we are a consortium cooperative. We're a consortium cooperative because we're never going to make money to be a workers' cooperative, so we can't, pay wages. So as a consortium cooperative, people can be a business or an individual, and they can use the space to further their ends, but what they do has to further the aims and objectives of the space.
I see.
So we non-hierarchical in the way we organise. As I said before, it's an open door and it's a yes, and we will work really with anybody. We won't have, we're never gonna. We're not like Puritans. We don't want people to tick every box before they can actually work here, because we know when we say we sort of lead for example, it's about living your beliefs, and sort of saying, this works for us and we quite enjoy it and we're having a lot of fun. It might work for you. So it's really about the biggest obstacle, I think, is people don't have visible alternatives anymore. They believe that there's only one system, and you have to work within it. So wherever we can, and it means we have some very interesting conversations with people that have differing views on vaccinations, things like that. It's kind of we go right across the spectrum. But unless you're in a position to have a conversation about it, have dialogue, rather than shut down and the tribalism, which is a big problem at the moment, then you're never going to break through that. And a lot of the time, these people are walking the same direction. So while you're walking the same direction, you might as well work together.
There's a lot of mutual aid and things like that going off here. We all do things to help out around here what we can, and we all get something back from it, from others helping and so on. And like Warren's saying about the trying to be as broad as possible, talking to all sorts of different people. We've got this other project, this Doncaster Engagement Network, which is about bringing community groups and working together and stuff. And me and Warren have been involved with it, and we wanted to do anarchist things. So we said it's going to be non-political, which got quite a few of the leftists angry, but we didn't mean non-political in what we're trying to achieve, but not political. It's in just people having disagreements and sitting about talking about about what's going on and this and that. But it is just about doing, and basically most people want to do something good for the community and so on, and it's about putting in and doing what we can and what we feel we want to do for it, not about disagreeing what we think, those little things we disagree about. It's about coming together and around the things we do agree about.
Yeah, absolutely. And also having this ethos, non-hierarchical ethos, and an anarchist way to it. People are going to go away from here and perhaps want other things to be organised like this, you'd hope. Is that your hope?
That is the intention, yes. Yeah. So then we do a regular dinner, which is pay as you fill, with some rescued food and we do it pay as you fill, so we can buy some produce, some quality produce. And it's really about making sure there's a network of food available in warm spaces come the winter. But it's also a learning curve for us, because we did one at the Unitarian Church in town, and one of the people who joined us for dinner was a homeless lady who pointed out the problem of not being able to get drinking water in Doncaster. So there's one public toilet with fresh drinking water that closes at 3 o'clock. If she asks anybody for drinking water, she gets a 2-litre bottle that she has to lug around with her. So it's all these invisible problems that you don't know about unless you're having a conversation with the people, where it's part of their daily reality. So that's a massively important part of everything we do. Yeah. And the food thing, first lockdown, within a fortnight, actually before lockdown, we knew that there's going to be some vulnerable people. One of them, Audrey, is in her mid-80s. Her son used to run this when it was a training centre, and she was going to be vulnerable in lockdown. So we provided fresh produce to the kitchen on the corner, and was part of a scheme that was putting out 50 meals a day at one point. Yeah. Where the food banks, they got more bureaucratic, and the forms were scaring all the families off. People thought they were going to lose their kids. So it's being able to respond fluidly and be in a position where you can have the conversations that matter during what you're doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because like doing these communal meals, it's not simply about going out and providing the food, these meals and stuff, and the warm space and everything for the community. It's going out and demonstrating how it can be done, and seeding these ideas in communities, for those communities basically to give them the tools to be able to do those things for themselves. So it's not us going and doing things for them, it's us giving them the example, giving them the tools and so on. And also it is, there's plenty of things you don't know about that a community might need, so it is about going out and talking to people as well. Learn it. It has to be democratic like that, absolutely democratic, like people they feel they're speaking to peers, not to somebody higher up, which can be intimidating for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
We've also had 3-4 decades of top-down delivery, people parachuted in with wonderful ideas. They get paid a fortune to deliver something that has absolutely no impact at ground level. That's part of the Brexit vote, was because there were so many vanity projects with European flags all over them. They built a bridge on a swamp, and then 5 years later they had to repair the bridge because it was on a swamp and it was covered in European flags. So you can see the disconnect.
So obviously it's grown a lot, and you're talking a lot about skill sharing and stuff. So when you started, it was based around growing food initially, right? So was that something you had experience with before? Was it trial and error, kind of learning as you was going?
Definitely trial and error, because as I said, I wasn't supposed to be sort of running it. So the guy that started, we had some experience of growing, but we had done the guerrilla gardening. We'd done, we did encourage people to start growing food. We'd done plots around Doncaster, so there was a little bit of knowledge there. But it was a lot. The learning curve was about the relationships with food and how poor they are. So when we're working with kids and they started eating the food they produced, you realise there's a different dynamic it's like anything that you create when you're invested in, I suppose. So there was quite a learning curve when it came to how we, I don't want to say deliver workshops. That's not exactly what we do. We don't really do programmes. We don't want to force 100 people through a programme that they then forget about. We want relationships are key to everything, and we want those to be built through the work that we do. And again, growing and sharing food is one of the best ways of doing that.
Kind of workshops, it kind of implies some kind of transaction, doesn't it? It can sound transactional.
We're much more about just sharing knowledge here and educating to empower, rather than we are educating you. You are now gone away educated, see you kind of thing.
We work with people where education is a form of abuse. We work with kids that there's no such thing as a dysfunctional child. They just don't function in that classroom environment, and our relationship is significantly different. So they'll come over and we'll find out what they want to do, and they'll work on a project. Like they built before we put this floor in, they built a little stage, and they think they want to build a den, and it's a relationship they don't get anywhere else. And it's why they're targeted by such as county lines gangs, because they're looking for that relationship, they're looking for a family.
Yeah.
So they do great work with, we have Yorkshire Bike Shack started here, so they teach people how to repair and maintain bikes, and the bikes they do, they give to people in crisis. So the last one went to a guy that was housed, a homeless guy housed in Bentley, but his family were in Mexford, a few miles away, so they got a bike to do that. But the kids, the primary school kids are the best ones. You can see there's a spark, you can see that you've seeded something, that there's a real change. Because when they get a bit older, it's like at the end of the tunnel, you think, I'm not going to be here much longer, so you don't need... Yeah, but we had kids. One guy wasn't allowed outside his own garden because he was so hated in his community. But he put this puffin behind us, put it on, 11-year-old put it in on his own. That was a project that was quite... First time they came over, only one was allowed, the rest wouldn't stop swearing, so just this one kid came over and just helped us put in a pond. So then he went back and told them we're digging, so then they all started coming over, and every Thursday they were over doing various things with on growing, and then worked with a grass cutter at the local park, and they were like ducklings with him. He even took them up to the local plant nursery, and the kids said, we're kids, can we have a discount? They got their own ongoing 20% discount, and they absolutely loved it. They built wildlife areas around the town, things like that, and unfortunately, even though there was plenty of anecdotal evidence for these kids' lives had changed, there wasn't enough statistics, and didn't tick enough boxes, and they closed the program down. It's really difficult.
So what's the reaction been from, has there been any comments or reactions from local teachers who have seeing their students come here? And
yeah, I mean, with the Primary Learning Centre, they were fantastic. They documented it all, and one of their people who used to work for that now works at the school next door. Unfortunately, safeguarding causes a lot of issues. So we worked with a lot of young adults with learning difficulties, and one of them, her mother said she never did anything at home, but she wouldn't stop working here. She was amazing, very knowledgeable. So the school said, can you repair our raised beds? And I said, well, Sophie would be perfect. She's got learning difficulties. The kids would learn that, from a mentor that was was different from their everyday teacher. But they wouldn't let her because she hadn't been DBS checked. She was only 16 and she had her own, safeguarding procedures around it. But it's just that, you don't protect kids by putting fences around. You're surrounded by people, not fences, don't you? And that's what protects kids. And it's just sort of something down this risk aversion to the point of doing nothing. It's a real problem at the moment. Not all schools, but quite a lot. It's hard. Again, as anarchists, it's kind of the opposite to the education system we would desire, isn't it? So,
yeah. You see how free kids feel when they come down here and they actually get asked their opinions on things and actually get to contribute, as simple as them painting the stage and getting to actually choose what colours and what they do in it and having complete creative independence. You can see they never get that in school. They don't get that in home. They don't get that anywhere. They don't get to actually stand as fully functioning people and make decisions, whereas here they can come down and they're actually asked, their opinion is taken in, and they're able to make decisions and do their own thing, which they don't get to do very often.
No, I think sorry.
Yeah, how do they react? Because for us, when we teach 18-year-olds, we want to know their opinion and we want to try and develop their critical faculties. And when you ask them for their opinion, ask them to make an argument in their essay, which they're not allowed to do really in school, they're just confronted with anxiety. And so for us, it's always, well, at least for me, I'm trying to get rid of that anxiety in my students. So how do they react here? Is it anxiety, or do you not show them?
The best example I could think of is literally with the stage. I had a group of girls who were painting it, and when they asked me what I wanted to do, I was like, well, it's up to you girls. And they all stopped and looked at each other, and you could see complete confusion on their faces. They didn't know. And there was about 10-15 minutes where they didn't know what to do with themselves, they couldn't figure it, but then all of a sudden when they realised that they did have full faculty and agency over this thing, they really just let loose, and it was so nice to see those barriers breaking down, and they started even communicating with each other more and stuff like that, and it's just really nice to see. You don't see it very often, but there is definitely, when you do ask kids for their opinion and give them that agency, there is that moment of they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to process it, and you've just got to let them process it themselves and get through it, because being down here, you are very independent. You're very much, you don't have to come here and do anything. We're not about productivity here or anything like that. You can be just as productive sat here taking in the view and everything. So giving kids those options is, yes.
You can see it, can't you? Because they're from the National Citizen Service. So they do a week and an outward bound, a week at the local football stadium doing work for charity, and then they do a week for a social enterprise such as this. And in that week, you can see the change over the week, can't you?
Yeah,
so
and it's very regimented at first, and then when
they
come
own the
here
site
and
by
then
the end, don't they?
It says a lot about the education system, doesn't it? That creativity is stifled.
Definitely.
They're afraid of creativity, aren't they? They want education by rote because it's parroting them. But the primary school next door, and the kids are suffering from anxiety. We're trying to do a program with the worst of them, but they shouldn't be having anxiety and stress at that age, should they? It's
No.
completely dysfunctional education.
Well, should we have
system.
it at any age?
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Well, that kind of brings me on. So you said Mind comes here, and I guess people who aren't listening in the UK, Mind is a charity that deals with mental health, around mental health. So do they come here on the basis that it's just kind of therapeutic for people? And
Yes, yeah, they do a garden in the corner. They've got a plot, so we've got lots of plots that different groups can use. And yes, they just find gardening therapeutic. But today they were just sat here all day, weren't they? So it's kind of the site itself is also naturally therapeutic. Again, it's relationships, it's rebuilding relationships. We live in a society that destroys relationships for profit. And so it's become a radical act just to have space where people can just naturally grow together. So
and just take a moment as well. Capitalism teaches us that if we're not productive at every single second of the day, then we're completely worthless. And we want to teach that that's not the case here. Your productivity is not a measure of your worth. Because there are people that can't be as productive as they may measure themselves up against it. And everyone is worthy, and everyone can sit and just enjoy the space, however that comes in for them, whether that is a bit of hard graft or just sitting and watching the trees.
It's brilliant. It is. It really is. And I was just thinking, so what you were saying there, Emma, it was making me think about activists who get burnt out. Is this a place where people come to recover from that? Or
that's exactly my story, basically.
Okay.
Is I was down at the HS2 camps for a couple of years and just got completely burnt out by everything, seeing the constant destruction, seeing, all the people, you live in this constant state of terror all the time and fight or flight mode. I had a friend who was in the army and did time in Afghanistan, and he said that being there on the camps is worse than that because of the state you're in all the time. And I just had a complete breakdown, came back here, and the space has literally healed me. I pretty much haven't left since I came back, haven't I? Because I volunteered a bit here beforehand, went down to the camp, got really into activism, started with sort of vegan activism and then got into the Extinction Rebellion when that all happened, and then moved on to the HS2 camps, and just, it's very tough living down there, and this place is so healing for it as well. And it really does, it gives you hope, because you don't have any hope when you're seeing destruction all the time. You're constantly living in the muck and mire, and you're seeing, the crap of humanity all the time. But here it shows you that alternative systems are possible. You don't have to be constantly fighting against the system to actually fight it. You can just step out of it and create your own system.
Yeah.
And that's what anarchism is about to me. It's just, creating something outside of the one. There's a line from a song that I think that says, anarchy means for you to treat your neighbour in a way that makes your neighbour pleased to know you. And that's the core of it, of what we do here as well, is just we want to make everyone live a happy, healthy life, and that's totally possible. It's just capitalism tells us no, libertarian tells the whole neoliberal system just tells us no all the time, but we can. You just have to build it yourself. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent from the activist bit.
I think that was brilliant.
Yeah, it kind of touches on stuff that we were talking to Ruth before as well, like
Ruth Kinner.
Ruth Kinner, yeah, and hope came up at the conversation towards the end of the conversation, and something that in an environment which seems so hopeless, especially in neoliberal Britain, which along with North America is probably among the worst in the Western society, kind of having spaces like this. So have you seen people come here and then go on and do other projects of similar kind of
We were trying. The idea was to seed other projects the same across Doncaster, but we were very much of a moment. So Jo Miller was head of the council then. She's been succeeded by a guy now who's an ecologist who's really good, but is having trouble because they sort of treat him as if he's been sort of put in place by Jo, so he doesn't always have the power within the system that she did. And we also had Jennifer Holmes, who used to work for the London Mayor's Department, who made sure that assets and legal did the job instead of saying, "Oh, we've never done that, so we can't do it." So we were quite unique in the moment of getting access to the council site. So we're trying to, and I'm trying to pitch because Doncaster's just got city status. We're trying to pitch it as the living city. So I'm trying to say that we need to celebrate the fact that we're 60% agricultural and seed more of these sites around Doncaster. So people come down and do projects. So Yorkshire Bike Shack, he approached us and said, "Do you have any space where I can do the bike repairs?" I said, "No, unless you want to help build one." So the shack, just there, the black roofing, that's made out of Ford Transit van bottoms, the plastic van bottoms, from a company called Clark's that refits and turns them into minibuses. So they take the van bottom out, we cut the wheel arches out and made the roofs and the shack out of that. So he started here, and now he has a lovely space over at St Cath's former hospital. That's a social enterprise hub. So he's got a huge space there now. He's doing really successful, isn't he? After it, yeah. So that's one of the examples. Yeah.
Growing together as well.
Growing together. Yeah, they were inspired by Bentley Urban Farm, which was lovely, and they have a 40-acre site just outside Doncaster, next to Edmonton Pit site. Yeah.
I'm going to say that we'll put more ends. They want to open a community garden now, don't they?
Yeah. There's quite a few that have been inspired and want their own space. It's just access to the land that's stopping them.
That's the thing, isn't it? What advice would you? I mean, you've been quite lucky, I think, in terms of the relationship with someone at the council.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned squatting as well. So, what advice would you give to people who want to kind of take their own space and create something similar?
Yeah, I mean, if you can find that relationship with somebody that's going to give you that added security, then that's great. You know, if you can find a wealthy benefactor that can buy land, fantastic. You know, you've got no, But if you haven't got that relationship and you need access to land, then land squatting is still a civil matter. So it's better to create something, especially if we create something inspiring. And the first thing we did was create the fire circle and spaces where people can come together. That's the most important thing. You can go and do your own thing on a piece of land, grow lots of food, but unless you're welcoming other people, you're just going to look like you've got one locally, aren't they, trying to take over the site? And and it's all about them rather than all about developing a community. So I would say that if you're going to squat land, make sure the first thing you do is develop a relationship with the community you're working with. And also say this isn't for us, this is for everybody.
Forgiveness rather than permission, always.
Yeah. Have you had any sense of people trying to control what you do here, or has it been?
No, we've been very lucky. We have, in terms that we were the first social enterprise to take over a council asset, and we had two issues since then. There was a 4-acre field next door that we asked to become a community asset, and they sold it for 12 grand. We could have done a fundraiser for that. And the other issue was that another social enterprise sort of took on the larger site around us, including us. So we're under 2 tiers, so we're under like another social enterprise. Effectively have signed the licence that we're under, which is not ideal either. So they're the only two real issues. The rest of the time because we do tick a lot of ecological boxes, partly we're tolerated because of that, but also I think times are so hard for the councils themselves that we can operate under the radar. You know, as long as we don't kill anybody, we're Or if we do, we can compost them.
We have a hole now.
Thinking about how tough things are for councils and for everybody at the moment. The cost of living crisis is kind of this glib term, isn't it, that's trotted out all the time. and even by conservatives. So they're admitting that there is this cost of living crisis. And we're speaking in August 2022, and we're expecting it to get much worse, aren't we? So what kind of role do you think the farm is going to play as that unfolds?
The main thing we're focused on is providing food and warm spaces. Direct sort of solutions that will also create community are really our focus. That's why we call it commensality kitchen, really. It's like that is the main focus. We want people. The only way to get through a crisis like this is collectively. That is the only answer.
Do you get the feeling that people are kind of accepting that as well? I
think the people at their best in crisis, aren't they? Like the first lockdown, very quickly came together and helped each other. When we did the food thing, people, we did it on the proviso that people said, "Can we have some food?" And we said yes. And then they said, "Well, what if people take advantage?" And we said, "Well, they get full bellies." That's kind of, that you can't not do something on the risk that someone's going to take advantage, because even the person taking advantage can learn something from the fact that we're not treating it as a valuable commodity in its own right. So it's people do. You always get, we're fighting a system that is, controls education, marketing. You're always going to be fighting those pressures. But if you live in a way where you show you're not suffering those stresses, then you instantly are more attractive than a society that wants people to be in a state of fear and anxiety.
Isn't it astonishing that it feels subversive to suggest that someone should have some food?
Exactly, yeah.
What was the effect of COVID with the farm? Did the pandemic burn people out, and you've seen people who were here before aren't here now, they're too tired, or has it grown?
Initially, it was just, I had to do it on my own,
right,
because of the first regulations. And that was good for me because there's 6 people in my house, so it was quite nice to be down here on your own. And but then, as the regulations changed, and we could use the outdoor spaces for individuals and groups to come together, it changed the dynamic for the better. So we still have people. There are people we've lost pre-pandemic that I think, like Darren and people like Simon.
It's always been a pretty main core of people that have been down here, and I mean the difference. I went away mainly during lockdown and came back to this place with it completely changed. There was a different energy. There was a lot more people. So I think because I'd had that step away that you hadn't, I could see the effect that lockdown had on the space, and that is that people want to be involved in this. They want to get outside. They want to create something different, and people are desperate to connect with people now. We spent so long locked in boxes that people are just glad to be out. And the amount of people that come down here and say how calm they feel, which is, shows that as soon as they step out the gate, they don't feel calm anymore. What's going on in that world that's making them not feel calm. And it's all this crisis, it's all of that. But here you can forget that.
There's also a hunger for change now, isn't there?
Yeah, there really is.
Which is again why you need to have the conversations with people that you might not traditionally sort of side with, isn't it? Because they're looking for something, and if the only thing they're offered is some right-wing propaganda, then we saw the problem then in the 90s when New Labour abandoned working class communities and the right filled the vacuum there. So now that people are actively looking for an alternative, if we don't have a dialogue because a person believes that the vaccine's got microchips in it, we're going to lose out. We just have to state what we believe. We get people that don't believe in climate change, don't we?
Yeah, we have all visions. Or
how do you navigate that? Also,
I'd probably say we don't quite get that. I don't think we have all these racists and stuff like that coming down here.
We don't quite get all.
Yeah, you don't get any sort of out and out right wingers, but you get people that would be scooped up by them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so.
their ideas are on the right-wing side, but they are still very caring and empathetic people. So left-wing ideals with right-wing beliefs kind of thing, but it's hard to navigate that because you're speaking to an intelligent person who on one hand loves science, but then will completely dismiss it when it doesn't benefit them. And, you know, we're fighting against so much at the moment that is real, all these real problems, and all these silly conspiracies come in, and you know, you can see they're only there to muddy the water, and it's like, we've got real problems to be focusing on here. We've got concrete things we can actually do. Let's not.
Yeah.
Let's not even worry about all that kind of stuff, you know.
We've got things we actually know.
Yeah, exactly.
As well, which is important. Can we focus on the things we know rather than the stuff that people have made up?
Yeah, like
misinformation is weaponized, isn't it?
Yeah, because doubt is the best way to stop anything, isn't it? Just get a bit of doubt.
Yeah, I think we need something like this in Loughborough, don't you, Shane?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because it's kind of making me, like when you said that post-COVID, you know, this people come here for community, and it's in the corridors of our department, you know, they've become desired. They're empty spaces now. Everyone works from home, and then it was I mean, it's a little different for us at work in that we get to talk to like really like amazing people, and being at Loughborough, you know, for us, there's great people there, but kind of just struck me that it was actually quite sad that like my point of like socialization was my workplace.
I think that is it for a lot of people, and people are beginning to realize that how meaningless the work we do actually is. You know, people are doing BS jobs, going into offices, doing absolutely nothing that actually really contributes, and people are wanting to do meaningful work now. You know, lockdown made people examine and really take stock of their lives, I think, and places like this you can actually see the good that comes out of the work you do, and we all wanting simpler things as well, and even just doing things like manual labor and stuff. I think that taps into like just that simpler way of life that we're all craving. And yeah, I mean, I'd hate to work in an office and see it all like it is now.
Yeah, it can be alienating.
I think we'd better go and find some patch of land in Loughborough and see what we can do. There's
plenty of green in Loughborough.
Loughborough Urban Farm, I like it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Okay, thank you very much. Should we wrap up there? That seems a suitable position to end it. But thank you very much for talking to us today. It's really, really helpful. Thank you. A really interesting project.
Yeah. And with that wraps up another episode of Little Bigger Anarchism. Again, I'd like to thank people who took the time to speak to us, and if you want to get in contact with us, ask any questions, any inquiries, you can reach us at alittlebiggeranarchism@gmail.com. And if you feel inclined to push us a little donation, you can do that at kofi.com/littlebiggeranarchism, and that will be in the description of the podcast as well. And until next time, that's bye from us.